Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, July 25th through Sunday, July 31st, 2022. This week we have a new moon in Leo. It's happening at 5 degrees on Thursday, July 28th. And so this will really kickstart the Leo season. We've already just entered Leo season with Sun entering Leo. So happy birthday to you, Leos, coming up soon for you guys. But the new moon really adds like a second layer, really immersing us into the energies of, in this case, Leo. So this is fixed fire. This is territory, sun ruled territory. Excuse me. So this means we're exploring themes of like pride and ego, self-expression, and fun and creativity as well. Leo is kind of a childlike sign. It likes to have fun. It's very passionate about what it does, though. Um, so this is Leo's time to shine right now, but for all of us, we are all experiencing this energy as well, and that may look different ways depending on our own astrology. But we're all kind of going through this now. So this is an exciting time. Sun is in domicile in Leo, which means that this is a generally relatively easy time. Of course, very, very general. It depends on your own chart. Um, but yeah, and one thing I wanted to show you is if we can just go back, we've had kind of a major shift, and this is a more kind of short-term shift. So this is something you would experience more on a day-to-day level. But if we just go back, like for example, just 1 week prior, you can see Sun and Mercury were both in Cancer. Venus was just entering Cancer from Gemini. So we've had all three of these innermost planets, if you will, just switch signs. With Sun and Mercury entering Leo in particular, this is a way different vibe. Cancer is a much heavier energy. It's much more sentimental and conservative. As Sun and Mercury have, entered Leo now, we're much more expressive. We're more spontaneous. It always, I always say like when you switch from a yin energy to a yang energy like this, it's like things are lighter. It's like the air is less dense and you have more room to just like roam around and be funny or weird. There's different pros and cons to it. So I don't want to glamorize one side or the other. But yin phases like Cancer that we have just recently moved out of, those are more about rest. They're more about integration. And as we move into a more, short-term yang phase like this into Leo season, this is more about activity. It's more about, applying, whatever you've learned from Cancer, from, going kind of into your feelings, if you will. Leo is now basically the expression of whatever we learned or integrated in Cancer season. And there's almost like this breathing in and out as you go from one sign to the other. It goes in with the yin sign with water or earth, and then it goes out. There's an expression of that. There's a release of energy with a yang sign, and then it will go back in again once we enter Virgo season, in several weeks, I guess. But this week we do have one other major event besides the Leo new moon. We do have Jupiter turning retrograde. I feel like every week lately it's like there's a new planet turning retrograde. So honestly, I was slightly bummed out about this. Maybe I am, no one's unbiased completely, but I kind of say like with these outer planet energies, especially as they turn retrograde, it's almost like that planet's energy becomes sedated a little bit because it becomes more subtle, more non-physically oriented. So, it's not that it's not there, it's just kind of it's not as vivid to experience. And with Jupiter, Jupiter's a benefic. It expands things. It creates kind of abundance, or it's an energy that you kind of like to have on your side. As we are mortal, we have circumstances we have to navigate. So Jupiter turning retrograde. I guess on the positive side, it could be a good time for re-looking at things involving Jupiter. So Jupiter's in Aries right now, so it really has to do with our ego and self-expression. So maybe the next couple months could be a time for like re-looking at all of that, if you will. But let's get into the day by day here. So we start out Monday, July 25th, and Moon has just entered Cancer actually, so it will enter Cancer about midday Eastern Standard Time. And Moon's in domicile here, so we have a couple day window while Moon is hanging out in Cancer, for these couple days before the new moon. This is actually pretty cool because Sun is in domicile in Leo and Moon is in domicile in Cancer. So these are very different energies, of course. Sun and Moon are very different. But having them, they're both in signs that like they're their home signs. They're both in their respective signs where these planets are very strong. The energies, like the way that these planets express themselves when they're in these signs is very easy, very natural. It's very, we can readily accept it and understand it. Sun in Leo is a time of, expression and fun and, ego, all that stuff I talked about. So that's kind of how the sun typically is. Sun is a kind of fiery energy. It's warm. Leo has a lot of those same traits. And then same with Moon and Cancer. Both Moon and Cancer explore themes of emotion, intuition, psychic abilities, femininity, nurturing, empathy, things like that. So, so this is actually pretty good, I would say, from a kind of subjective point of view. Sun, having planets in general in domicile makes things easier and simpler. And I'm not saying that that necessarily makes them better. If you have planets in like detriment, for example, it does make things more interesting and you can see like outside points of view better. So there's always a pro and a con to everything. But I think in these kind of challenging situations that we navigate, it can be refreshing to see like, oh, cool, for these couple of days, Sun and Moon are both in their kind of happy places. So that's something that I think is nice. We do have one aspect on Monday. We have Venus at 9 degrees Cancer, and it does, well, technically, it squares Venus at 8 degrees Cancer, makes a square to Jupiter at 8 degrees Aries. So, right, I guess earlier in the day before Venus reaches that 10th degree. So, this is interesting, I think, especially considering that Jupiter turns retrograde only a couple days later. I always pay special attention to any kind of planetary aspects just before or after or during a planet's, stationing direct or retrograde. Because I should have mentioned in the intro that, Jupiter is basically stationary this week. It's not really moving. It's come to a standstill as it's preparing to turn retrograde this week. And even once it turns retrograde, it will start out very slow before it, starts fully moving retrograde. So as Jupiter's, apparently kind of at a standstill in the sky, its energies are intensified. So we could, especially considering that Jupiter is in Aries, which Aries is a sign that kind of it can overdo things. It can be very intense. It could be dramatic. So having this planet, which already, Jupiter is a benefic, its energies are generally easy to work with, but one downside of Jupiter is that it can blow things up and exaggerate things, and especially when it's stationary and it's in this fiery Mars ruled sign of Aries, um, there could be, like temper tantrums or excess, people overdoing it, if you will. So to kind of take that however you will. You could apply those words many different ways, and that's kind of exactly what I'm trying to say, I guess. So whether it's someone overdoing it, like having a very large reaction to an issue that's very trivial, or maybe someone overindulging themselves, or spending too much. These are kind of themes that can come up. So this becomes especially maybe exacerbated or highlighted with Venus making this square to Jupiter. Um, Again, Venus in Cancer, Jupiter in Aries. I've often said that Cancer Aries squares are particularly volatile because these signs are both very emotional, I would say, but in such different ways. It's hard for them to compromise. So that's why we have this clash. The square aspect is a tense aspect. And this is kind of interesting because these, Venus and Jupiter are the two main benefics. These are the easy planets to work with. With Venus and Cancer, it's showing that our desires are more, we're desiring familiarity at this time, generally speaking, of course. We're more attuned to our beliefs and kind of our bottom line, like how do we really feel deep down. We're more, desiring issues of that kind of nature. But then this is clashing with a societal need right now for initiation. Because Jupiter often shows kind of where we're at on a societal level, and in Aries, it's showing that we're really ready to turn the page and move on to something completely new. So there could be this kind of clash between like financial interests versus governmental interests, like issues with the economy. Um, because I think while Jupiter turning retrograde can also indicate like kind of the curtain being swept out from under you, and especially Venus, which does have to have a lot to do with finances and luxury goods and such. with Venus squaring Jupiter, I almost feel like it's kind of saying that like if you were in this illusion that you had a lot of abundance, these aspects would really take that illusion from you and make it very clear the actual situation, I think. Or they could maybe damage the situation just a tad bit. So as we start the week, at least we have Sun and Moon in really happy signs. I think we're generally in a good place. Now, of course, that's a huge generalization. It always has to do with your own personal astrology. But as for all of us as a whole, we're generally in kind of a good place with the two luminaries in domicile. So, yes, there's kind of some financial nonsense going on or financial shenanigans, I would say. Maybe a potential sharp decline, but we're in good spirits anyway. Sometimes there can be that like disconnect, I think, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, so kind of interesting start to the week, I guess. Let's go forward to Tuesday. So Tuesday, July 26th, Moon continues through Cancer. So again, I really love this. And Moon crosses over Venus, as you can see right here, about halfway through the day, Eastern Standard Time. So this is really beautiful. I mean, Moon has to do a lot with our just like kind of day to day, like our current feeling, how we feel deep down. And this is especially potent again because Moon is in Cancer, it's in domicile, so we're really aware of our feelings right now. And as Moon crosses over Venus, this means that all of our like current attitudes and feelings become infused with Venusian energy. So there's more of a focus on pleasure, desire, attraction, enjoying ourselves, treating ourselves. So not gonna lie, this looks pretty nice. And by now, Venus has kind of moved away from that square with Jupiter. It's just like 2 degrees away, so it's not as acute anymore. It's already beginning to separate. So this looks generally positive, I think. I mean, it's pretty well rounded. The only thing I can say for Tuesday as well as much of this week is that there is kind of a lack of air. There's not really any air planets other than Saturn in Aquarius, and so especially again with the the luminaries, Sun and Moon, in their respective domicile sign, I think we are very much feeling um, aware or comfortable. We feel like we know what's going on at the very least, but things could be um, things could feel a little bit like stifled, like we're not getting enough air. Things can feel kind of heavy right now or intense with that lack of air. But that's the only thing I really see. Other than that, it looks like a pretty well-rounded chart here. We do have Mercury squaring Mars today. So Mercury's at 14 degrees Leo. It makes a square to Mars at 14 degrees Taurus. So this shows, this could show like we may feel a little bit irritable. With Mercury and Leo, we tend to be very confident in expressing ourselves, but with this clash to Mars and Taurus, this shows that we may be irritable, anxious, aggressive, um, and this is just going to be a small flare up. Mercury is really cruising along right now; it's traveling very quickly, so this would not encompass the entire day on Tuesday. I think it would really just affect maybe just a portion of the day. Okay, let's jump forward again to Wednesday, July 27th. So Wednesday, Mercury makes another aspect. Mercury is being its kind of normal chatty self, making all these aspects here. Mercury at 16 degrees Leo makes a trine to Chiron at 16 degrees Aries. I think this is actually really nice. I'm always kind of hesitant with Chiron aspects. I feel like Chiron, especially in Aries, can be somewhat of a nuisance. I'm not gonna lie. Just because yes, it brings up all this like kind of therapeutic stuff and issues from our past and traumas, and I think that's good. That can be really good to bring that up and to communicate ourselves and desire understanding, not only with ourselves, understand other people and all that is super great. But having it in Aries, a lot of times things don't happen as nicely as we imagine them to be, and there could be a lot of friction, protests. I think sometimes it can end up being destructive. Um, just even in our interpersonal relationships, desiring maybe our intentions are good, but sometimes we can get so worked up in our own frustration that it can be detrimental to what we intend, and it can actually create lack of understanding. However, all of that being said, I think Mercury in Leo making the trine to Chiron is exactly what Chiron in Aries kind of needs. For one, this is a trine, so this is a harmonious aspect. And Mercury in Leo is, we're combining this kind of, energy of Chiron, which I described. We're combining that with Mercury, which is more about kind of, it has an intellectual focus, a logical focus, and it has to do with like translating. So I think this could create almost like a kind of like a nice harmony in terms of expressing ourselves very well. And it's interesting that it's happening in the fire signs, which typically have to do with the self, the ego, self expression. But Chiron has to do with empathy as well, healing others or being healed by others. So I think this is really nice because is sort of, Mercury has us all be kind of like a mediator. It's mediating energy. So especially with Mercury and Leo, trining Chiron, I think this is really excellent energy if we do, have personal things we want to bring up, or if we desire, increased understanding between ourselves and others. We could maybe go to some potentially kind of dark places, or deal with some really heavy stuff. But because there's this fire influence on it, we're doing so in a kind of passionate way, like we're speaking with like conviction right now. But I think there's just enough of a balance with this trine to Mercury that we can not get so worked up, that we can still be aware of ourselves and aware of how we're coming across, making sure that we're conveying the correct message, to so that the result will sort of be in line with our intentions, I guess. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that was kind of out there, but that's kind of what I see with that. Moon continues through Cancer, so again, I like this, but at this point, it's really a dark moon. You won't be able to see it at all because now it's approaching the sun. So we're kind of gearing up for that new moon now, and I'll talk more about that, of course, on Thursday once we get there. But right now for Wednesday, things are kind of just winding down, especially because the moon is still in Cancer, which is a yin sign. Cancer likes to keep things kind of cool, calm, and collected. Yes, it is a sign that deals with heavy emotions and sometimes maybe strong displays of emotions, but still, Cancer, ideally, Cancer likes to only display those intense emotions in like secure environments. It likes to keep things kind of controlled. It has that outer shell. So especially because the moon is, just kind of concluding its lunar cycle, approaching the sun, there's almost like this energy of winding down, and it could end up, especially depending on your own astrology, it could end up being a good day for like spirituality or kind of reflecting, going within, maybe taking a rest. Um, so you can kind of, depending on what your angle is and what your own astrology is, you can kind of do either one. You can make the use of this fire influence with Sun, Mercury, Chiron, and Jupiter in fire signs, and with the trine between Mercury and Chiron. So you could take advantage of all that fire energy and like use that for greater self-expression and understanding of others. Or you can go along with the energy of Moon, Dark Moon in Cancer today, and just kind of just chill out, rest, reflect. I think either of those kind of two different themes going on are equally supported right now. And one thing I wanted to mention, so right now before the moon leaves Cancer, we do have mostly a fire and water focus right now, and fire is kind of the energy of like spirit. It's very active, fiery. I guess we're all kind of familiar with that. But where I'm kind of going with this is like fire and water are the two more emotional elements for us as humans. Um, compared to air and earth, for example. So we can be more in our feelings right now, I think, in general. Um, More in our feelings, more, I don't know, more soulful. There's this kind of like soulful energy when there's a lot of fire and water. So I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe just think about it and you'll kind of see what I mean. There's like this kind of soulfulness, like people are almost more sincere when there's a lot of fire and water kind of mixing in. Okay, let's jump forward to Thursday because Thursday is actually the really big day of this week, I suppose. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening today. So, Thursday first, Moon leaves Cancer, enters Leo, and pretty much right away, within that same day, I guess I should say, we will have that new moon in Leo at 5 degrees. So you can see here, this chart is showing just before this new moon at 5 degrees Leo. I will come back to that in just a moment, but I just wanted to mention we also have Jupiter turning retrograde today, and on a much more minor note, we do have Mercury making a square to Uranus. Excuse me. So, okay, so let's talk about the new moon first, since I guess that's kind of the biggest thing. So, I think I covered kind of the main points, but it is like a new beginning, and especially with Leo, Leo's a fire sign, so it tends to begin things, it likes to initiate. Leo's also a fixed sign though, so it's like it's this combination of fire, which initiates things, with fixed. It's fixed fire. Fire initiates, but fixed signs like to keep things stable. So Leo is almost like constantly initiating. It's like constantly beginning things in a very stable way though. So it's kind of funny, having a new moon here. A new moon is also a beginning. So we're having this new beginning in a sign, which is kind of about beginnings in a way as well. Um, so, so yeah, that's kind of what is happening. And for the next month, as we go through this lunar cycle, the moon will of course go through all the other signs in the next month or so, but it's still, we're going to be exploring themes that originated with this new moon. So this new moon is happening in Leo. Leo is the territory of children. So maybe, you could be more active with children in your life, however that be. Or it could be that you're the one that's being a child. Maybe you're being, playful, or just having a focus on having fun right now. Um, Leo is about creativity and creation, but it's the kind of creativity that happens naturally and spontaneously when you're having fun. So when you're just messing around, being goofy, doing what you love, doing maybe something you're passionate about, or maybe just having fun, that's the kind of creation that comes from Leo, and that's why it ends up being about children. It's not only the childlike energy, but in a kind of backward way, it's almost like a certain playfulness that like results in having the kids in a way. Um, Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but Leo's also like, very passionate. So we can all kind of have collective new beginnings with those things I just described, during and after this new moon in Leo. And also on a more kind of basic level that I think would more apply to everyone at large. Um, I always say this, but it's because it's very true. Like having the sun enter a sign does enter that season. So yeah, Leo season has already started, but it's almost like the sign doesn't really truly start until you get the new moon in that sign. So whatever Leo season is like for you, this is really gonna kind of step it up. We're gonna like really, really enter it, if that makes sense, on a whole nother level. So again, we have all these issues about pride, self-expression, having fun, etc. In the northern hemisphere, this coincides with the middle of summer, basically. So what better time for relaxing, lounging, treating yourself, indulging, having a good time, maybe focusing on something you're passionate about, etc. It coincides with summer. This is the sun's energy. This is, um, I don't know why like Amun Ra popped in my head, like the sun god. But yeah, this is that kind of energy going on. Okay, and let's see, we also have, okay, and then Jupiter turning retrograde. So I think I kind of talked about that a lot, but for one, I just want to reiterate that it's not something that, yes, technically Jupiter does go retrograde today, but it's not something that happens like in an instant. Planets will slow down, gently stop, and then slowly start to accelerate in the opposite direction from our perception from Earth, of course. So that's what Jupiter's doing now. So it's almost like we're kind of we could experience a somewhat slower pace in terms of society, in terms of the government, the economy, what's going on with like social trends. All of that could kind of slow down just a tiny bit with Jupiter retrograde, especially because Jupiter's not the only one that's retrograde now. Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, you can see all of these are retrograde. So it's like, many of the outer planets are retrograde. The outer planets tend to have to do with society, like historical trends, or kind of what's going on in the background or in the collective. So with all those retrograde, this shows that we're in this phase for this part of the year where things are slower, or things are also more non-physical, not apparent. They're more subtle. So there may be stuff kind of going on behind the scenes that we will only be privy to later. So you can watch out for that, or Or this could also just generally be a time of rest or inactivity as well. And I say that, and I know that, there's always stuff going on, especially these days. But yeah, again, maybe it's just more covert, hidden, secretive. Maybe it's more spiritual in nature. We have to have these pauses. We can't just be constantly going all the time and having everything be at 100 miles an hour. We have to like slow down in order to kind of connect with these more non-physical aspects of reality in order to like channel the energies from there, basically. Especially if we want to have a really rewarding experience, that's something that we'd really focus on as much as possible, I think. So that's generally the focus. And again, I think this is going to be. I'm almost a little bit wary about this because, especially like I was talking about earlier, Jupiter in Aries is such a firecracker, explosive energy. And then when we've grown accustomed to having this strong, fiery, intense energy kind of behind the scenes with Jupiter in Aries. And as it slows down and then goes in reverse, I think when you take away that momentum, I'm just a little bit scared to see kind of what happens. I think slipping the rug out from under you is a good metaphor, or taking away your momentum. Um, once that happens, I think it will allow us to get a better picture of maybe reality, but this is a less light and fluffy view of reality. Again, Jupiter makes things big and grand and really fun and brings abundance. So when you kind of nullify all that or sedate it or put it in the non-physical realms, things are a little bit more. Maybe they're more realistic, but they're also more difficult, if that makes sense. Um, so I would just be cautious. I never want to be a doomsday like prophet or anything like that. Nothing at all on that level, but I just think maybe this could have an effect with like the economy, especially. Okay, and then last but not least, we have Mercury squaring Uranus. So Mercury's at 18 degrees Leo, and then it squares Uranus, which is at 18 degrees Taurus. This is very interesting because Uranus is just about to make its conjunction. It's basically conjunct the North Node. You can see they're both at 18 degrees Taurus. So, yeah, this is pretty interesting. And Mercury's about to square the nodes as well. So, um, okay. So, this is interesting. It's interesting whenever we have an aspect between Mercury and Uranus because Mercury is the intellect, communication, how we speak, our mannerisms, and then Uranus is the planet of awakening and huge epiphany, realization. Some people say Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury because it's almost like Mercury squared. It's like Mercury's about thoughts, Uranus is about like paradigm shifts and stuff like that. So it's almost like the same issues of Mercury, but in like a higher dimension or something. So when you have these two planets square, so this brings like tension, brings harsh energy there. So I'm thinking we may be privy to huge realizations and awakenings, but it may be about issues that are very uncomfortable, or it could be kind of jarring realizations or revelations. Um, this is especially interesting because, as I'll talk more about for Friday, Mercury's just about to square the node. So we're at this turning point with our thoughts, beliefs, the way that we're thinking, our perceptions. We're at some kind of turning point, and this usually isn't like a huge event or anything. You may kind of barely feel this, but it's to me, I always bring it up just because it is an interesting little checkpoint. Um, just we're about halfway between these two um, points. Like about 3 months ago during that eclipse season, I guess it's not quite 3 months, but we're about halfway in between the eclipse seasons, and so halfway in between we have Mercury, and then soon the Sun will square the nodes as well. So it's just a checkpoint. It's like we're halfway. We're making some kind of shift with our perception, if that makes sense. So yeah. So as Mercury squares Uranus, this could be kind of jarring revelations, I think. Let's jump forward to Friday, July 29th. Okay, so again, technically speaking, I believe it's very early Friday, July 29th that Mercury squares the node. So again, you have that like checkpoint, that turning point. I don't think that necessarily will like, result in any huge events in your life or anything. So that's why I say it's kind of just a minor note. But yeah, it's a turning point. It's a halfway point. We also have Moon crossing over Mercury today, and in doing so, Moon will square the nodes, and Moon will square Uranus as well. So I think this could be a little bit unsettling. We could feel like we could have some kind of rude awakening, I guess, or we could just feel a little unsettled. We may feel a little bit out of control, especially now that Moon has entered here. Now that's kind of bringing in our feelings, our emotions, our core beliefs, and stuff like that. So I think this could be a little bit jarring. It's like there's some kind of sudden shifts, and this I wouldn't see this as really big stuff unless you happen to have planets around these points. If you have planets around, I would say let's say 16 to 20 degrees of the fixed signs, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, then yeah, this could like maybe change something in your life where you actually make a big move or a big decision. But other than that, for the rest of us, I don't see this as like life changing. I just see this as like there could be sudden developments that happen in a kind of abrupt manner, or maybe you become aware of them in a very abrupt manner. Like, oh, okay, this is happening now. Like, I didn't know that. I will have to adjust, kind of. So the more kind of open you can be, especially open to conflicting ideas or other perceptions, new perspectives. That's what I would kind of advise here. Okay, let's jump forward again. So going forward to we are now on Saturday, July 30th. Moon enters Virgo today. About halfway through the day, Eastern Standard Time again. Looks like around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Moon enters Virgo, so that's a little bit different. Moon again is now in a yin sign of Virgo, so we're wanting to be more organized and practical. I think this is pretty cool because it brings some grounding energy into things. We already have the fire with Leo, Sun, and Mercury. We've got, Venus and Cancer still, which is water. So now we're bringing in some Earth, adding a little bit of like responsibility, practicality into the mix as well. So that's kind of nice, I think. And then Moon is just like barely a glimmer right now. It's barely just a sliver of a crescent moon right now, if you can see it at all. So we're just kind of in these beginning stages of this new lunar month, this new lunar cycle. Today we also have Mercury opposing. Yes. Um, Mercury opposes Saturn today at 22 degrees. So I think this too, excuse me, I think this too could result in maybe feeling a little bit weighed down by your responsibilities, by the long term future, by your goals, by your commitments, by your limitations with your resources like time, money, and energy. All of that could be kind of like heavy right now with Mercury opposing Saturn. We may feel just a tiny bit constricted. So with this, all you can really do is just be practical, own your own situation. Say you are in charge of your life, and you can see this energy not as a burden, but look at your resources, look at your time, energy, money. Be honest with yourself, and that will allow you the best result. That will allow you to use your limitations as assets, basically, rather than limitations, I guess. But this is a quick aspect. Mercury, like I said, is cruising along, so this will kind of dissipate. So there may be this kind of like heaviness on Saturday, but it should fade away into the background pretty quickly. Let's go forward to Sunday, July 31st. Moon continues cruising along through Virgo. We finally have Uranus exactly conjoining the North Node today. This is really interesting, especially financially. Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, and since that time, we've had a lot of economic instability. That's pretty obvious. Astrologers, pretty much any astrologer would have told you that before 2018 that Uranus is in Taurus, so it is shaking up our entire economic system. That is very apparent now as we're about halfway through Uranus's transit through Taurus. So now, as it crosses over the North Node, this is pretty interesting because the North Node typically is where we're like meant to go. It's like destiny, it's very karmic, and it tends to be very positive. North Node is it's a little bit different with looking at like personal charts for like people. But for transits like this, having planets cross the North Node is the most auspicious. It's the most like easy to deal with, most positive, I guess. I hate using that word because it's so subjective. Um, but Uranus crossing over the North Node is an energy that's very easy for us to deal with. So I would speculate that this looks like it would bring positive change for the economy. And by positive, I guess I just mean maybe switching to a system that is more efficient or more fair. And I'm not talking about like a huge collapse or anything like that, but there could be some events kind of coming down the line, changing things just a tad bit. This is just one small piece of this. Really, it's an 8-year economic shift. So this is just one kind of piece in the puzzle of that kind of some changes coming down the line, but nothing to fear since again, it's the North Node we're talking about. So this is a positive energy. Other than that, for Sunday, it looks like a pretty well-rounded day with Sun in Leo and Moon in Virgo. These energies are so different from one another that you can kind of just take what you'd like from either. When we have an Earth and fire focus, we tend to be very like hands-on and very much wanting to engage in the physical world. So maybe doing something, like athletic or going on a walk or something would be really rewarding. Um, Something like that I think would be the best. Or being very productive right now because Sun in Leo is a very like ambitious, fiery, motivated energy, and then Moon in Virgo wants to be productive and wants to I don't know, make order out of chaos, I guess. So yeah, maybe having fun, doing something physically oriented, or like getting some work done, organizing for Sunday would be probably the best use of your time here. So yeah, that's what I see with these energies going on this week, and it's pretty crazy. We're already wrapping up July, so next week I'll have your first week of Leo forecast, and until then, hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.